that hooray. So, Apple, they get 100% of the Pac-12. They take that 100% and they give ESPN 13 games for that Saturday night time slot. That means that about 20% of the content for the Pac-12 would be linear, correct? 80% Apple. Apple then gains access to the Pac-12 network without even having to buy it, but the total payout, of course, is not closer to the Big 12, and the streaming number is well above what Dr. Robbins at Arizona said, and others about 50% or more.
Yeah, I mean, look, it gets done. I mean, that's the thing, is it gets done if they do this, but they are, and as it hurdles towards the decision, I mean, it's getting closer and closer to the linear spots just aren't going to be there. And, you know, if this is the best deal that they have, then they're going to take it. But, you know, there is, you know, just only being on linear television very late at night is not going to help what your problem was earlier, which is getting the word out about you to places that aren't where you are.
Yeah, I mean, that's survival, so I guess that's a thumbs up. That's what you're looking for, I suppose. But on the flip side, just basically having the only games on linear being your Friday night games or your Saturday night games.
It'll be a Saturday late night.
Saturday late night game, that's all you've got. I mean,
which also means, Craig, that Oregon or Washington or any of them, that they lose the linear exposure throughout most of the day when people are ramped up early on a Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you can spin that however you want to. Again, I guess just staying together is a win. But, yeah, less money, but close enough money. I meto that's what everybody's anchoring for. The exposure part, it would be interesting. I don't think everybody would be happy with that. I just can't imagine how they would be. Then again, I mean, who's really got room to bitch and moan too much? I mean, there's, 3 schools that could really threaten anything? Or I guess 4. 4 corners and then – a couple of others if you believe all of the talk. So, actually that's more than half the conference. But there's Oregon State, Washington State. I mean, they're going to take whatever. They're going to be force-fed whatever and like it. So I don't know. I mean, yes, you survive, but there's a lot to also just kind of be wary of there.
So if, in fact, that works, Apple gets a reasonable rate for content. They get the Pac-12 network without even having to purchase it.
But yeah, they don't own it, though. It's not, and you would rather they buy it. Like, if you're a Pac-12 fan, I think you'd rather, Apple invest in it and secure it. But, this doesn't answer anything about the longevity. Mm-hmm. This doesn't answer anything about, how much are people going to tie themselves down with this deal? I mean, I can't imagine that everybody would love this. So, if not everybody is a fan of that, then, how long can you reasonably expect there to be a long-term deal in place, or is this just, like they said, kind of a short turnaround into the next, round of negotiations?
Again, what we're saying is that this appears to be, we're trying to say, how do people survive? ESPN gets their S4 content at a pretty good rate, but don't have to acquire additional overlap content. Those, again, who probably get what they at least want, a little bit of money, and also the fact that the conference survives. Washington State, Oregon State, Utah, Cal, and Stanford. Oregon, they lose any kind of linear opportunity as far as exposure, and maybe Washington too, whether it's a late morning game or, of course, if they're on the West Coast, any kind of those 2:30 kicks or whatever else you have on linear television on Saturdays when everybody, again, is juiced up. They've had those 11 o'clock kicks. Here comes the early afternoon kicks into the evening. Now, if you're Arizona, Colorado, Arizona State, you might even have more minimal exposure than even Oregon, who's probably wondering, where is our exposure during the day? How many of those games on the S4 slot, the late night Saturday spot, will include Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State? Now, Colorado of interest because of Dion, but how many of those slots are available? There's 13 all year long. And you'd want to have Oregon in there, right? Mm-hmm. And probably Washington in there. So maybe if they're on the road or at home, maybe they get that spot. What happens to Washington? They will probably get a lot of those last Saturday night spots, But that still doesn't help answer Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State. They're kind of like they're teetering in a way, kind of like on the diving board. Do you jump or do you not?
They're waiting to be impressed.
Yes.
They're ready. They're waiting to say yes to whatever it is that they're floating out there, and whether or not that's good enough is the question. If they're fine settling for, the least amount of money, although not enough to make them want to go jump, but certainly. I don't know how the current exposure for Arizona football would stack up to whatever this would look like. So I don't know how much of a difference it would be. But yeah, I mean, you're not getting a lot of spotlight. That's for sure. If you're one of those programs, most likely.
And then the thing is, they're setting a really high bar for. Okay, if you want to be on linear in that night game, you better be pretty damn good. So make sure it's one of your better seasons. Well, if you're Arizona and you haven't been good in a long time, then you're really not even going to luck into some of those games more often than not.
So what if they discuss, as just kind of picking the brain here of this scenario. So what about, okay, you can be on Saturday night, but you can't be on Saturday night more than, let's say, 5, 6, or 7 times.
Well, then if I'm Oregon, then I'm going to be mad because I know my team is good and I want to be on primetime as much as I can. Or
linear.
Exposed. Yeah,
you want to be on linear as much as you can, and that's
Yeah.
the one option you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it compares to what they've already experienced, like the Pac-12 network. I don't know all those numbers off the top of my head. I don't have any, charts handy, but I would think that, yeah, there's probably going to be a little bit of bristling at that, but, you'll have a non-conference game against Texas Tech. I don't know what that'll air on. It's in Lubbock, but does that mean it would be like a Fox broadcast? So there's, 3 non-conference games that aren't necessarily into this Pac-12 deal. So if you're on there 6 times out of 9, is that a make or break for you? Do you need 9? Do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's why I'm just
If you give
openly,
someone 9, then someone's going to get 3.
right. So I don't know. Like, how many are we comparing it to already? Like, if they are only getting 6 already as it is, then is getting 6 again that big of a deal, or is it just fine because it's what they've? That's what I mean, and not knowing the exact numbers there. But yeah, Oregon would want to be on, big time TV as much as possible. They could become the darling of Saturday night Apple TV, I guess. But yeah, I would think they'd want some cable spots.
So let's say this. If you're ESPN and there's 13 slots, right, that's what you want. If ESPN would want any of the content, they'd want Saturday night because that's one that's open based on whatever happens eventually with maybe what they do with the Big 12. So if you're ESPN and you want those primetime games or late night games on Saturday, don't you want to pick those games? Don't you want to say these are the games each week we want, Oregon, whoever? But if you're Apple and you're putting all this, you're the one putting up all the money and leasing basically the time to ESPN, do you want to have the choice or do you want to split the choice? And can you ever come up with that? You know what I mean by that?
Oh, like ESPN is going to want to say this is the game that we want every week.
If they're leasing it from
Yeah,
Apple,
exactly.
basically,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, Apple owns it all, and they would lease the spot to ESPN. So,
But Apple's going to want some of these better games themselves wherever else they put them streaming.
of course, so. Hey, yeah, ESPN would love to do a deal with you, but we're going to dictate what games you get. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, sure. ESPN will say, sure, sign us up for Oregon State and Cal. No, of course not. So, yeah, there's a little bit of a disagreement, you would think, already there that need to be sorted out.
What ESPN's, and here's the thing, with ESPN and the deals they've made with everything else and the way that these things go, ESPN, Fox, and the ones that have multiple games throughout the day, they're going to have 3. Their goal is pretty much for you to sit there locked on and not leave until it's over. And they don't want to, open up that window for anybody else. They know that people flip around, but like if that's their goal, then yeah, you're going to miss on that altogether. So I don't know. It's such a complicated thing. And just looking back on this, I never thought you'd be in a position where there would not be enough linear space for a Pac-12. Yeah. It just didn't register in my mind, but when you have spent so much capital on other things, eventually somebody's going to get.
It's not a lack of space; it's a lack of money.
Yeah,
it's and I'm sure they could come up with the money, but no, they could find. I mean, Turner Networks, if they wanted to, could find a Saturday night to not play the latest rock movie and put on Washington versus Stanford instead. But do they want to pay the money to do that? Because playing the rock movie is probably
Well,
way
they might
cheaper.
Own that. Here's the thing: they might own it anyway.
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. The Turner could, or I mean, Warner Discovery, whatever, could already own that. So yeah, that's interesting.
Now, there's somebody that has actually listened to us, watched us, has followed us, what we do, who is very much heavily involved with marketing, with clients, and also with networks and whoever else. Basically saying that 80% of any streaming, if 80% of it is Pac-12, no matter what the streamer, whoever it might be, and Apple Plus is by far the smallest streamer right now. They have about 25 million subscribers. Amazon Prime has 200 million. The NFL, of course, was on Thursday nights with Amazon Prime, who have 200 million subscribers. And yet, remember, in 2021, Fox averaged 16.4 million viewers. Amazon Prime's game, 9.6 million, a 42% drop. So that's going to come into play. And you say, okay, well, wait a minute. The Big 12 has a lot of games on ESPN Plus. That's a streamer. ESPN Plus has about the same amount of streaming subscribers as Apple Plus does at 24.9 million, and they're up 42% from the year before.
Yeah.
We also just canned the guy in charge of ESPN Plus. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but
yeah. So there's a lot going on there, and look, Peacock just posted some quarter earnings that were bad. They're gonna probably lose $3 billion in their first year,
and that's post WrestleMania.
Yeah, and the projections for a lot of these are, especially the newer ones, they're expecting to lose money. Like, they knew that they were going to lose money for a couple of years, but it's not like, the rosiest, we're going to start making money in 2025 or 2026. That was the plan all along. I don't know if the plan all along means everything that's gone on. If you look at what's going on with Warner Brothers Discovery, all that, there's so much flux in the space that it is so hard to get a read on really what is profitable and what is good for everybody. Look, Apple is going to continue to grow because Apple has so much money. Amazon has so much money, but and they're not as controlled by as many people as some of these other groups are, so they can continue just to go and go and go. But some of these other ones, I mean, it's going to be tough. Like ESPN, massive company, Disney. Disney's got a ton of problems right now. None that's going to ever end Disney, but some that they're going to make decisions on that probably aren't fun for a lot of people.
Last thing. So if the NFL dropped 42% from Fox to Amazon Prime, what would the numbers then be for the Pac-12? From what would be either ESPN or something compared to being on streaming? That's the question. And that's got to be something that's in the discussion, too. We'll take a couple more comments, Craig, and then we get to take calls.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much the ratings matter here. I mean, if you sign up for the deal on Amazon, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, I guess it does to your next contract, but beyond that, I think if you're the Pack, you're just trying to get a deal and have it respectable, and you're not really worried about getting a 6.2 in Chicago or whatever. It's not that day and age anymore. I mean, I think streaming is the the wave of the future, like a lot of people say, but we're maybe not quite there yet. Like maybe their deal came up like a couple years too early. I still wonder if they can't, kind of be the head of the spear as far as, trying to make that more of the norm. I just don't know how much of a pull that product's going to have. But if you throw USC Oregon on Apple TV or whatever, like I'm sure there will be a good number of people that will sign up for that. But do you get Oregon fatigue after a while? Or, do you get a bunch of schools that are upset because it's just who's playing Oregon or Washington on Saturday night? Because that's what the rotation could very well be. I don't know. There's just a lot of questions with that. But, I think it's pretty clear that they're going to land on a streamer. It's going to be a good chunk streaming, but 80-20 is a very interesting number to have been speculated on there. And just the scenarios that you presented are interesting because we didn't cover all of this, this paper here in front of me, but depending on the topic you're speaking of, whether it's a minimum threshold of games or whether it's the percentage of streaming, then that moves the needle on which school might not love that the most, like whether it's Washington or whether it's Oregon or whether it's the Arizona schools. So there's a lot of things just based on this alone that are still needing to be figured out. And that's why we're sitting here, months down the line and not really much has seemingly changed.
Gary Wilson, Oregon and Washington late night will also have to compete with USC, UCLA in that late night spot.
Eventually, yep.
Slam dunk with a little less money or a little less likely. That's what ESPN did with the AAC. ESPN leased the AAC to CBS Sports Network. Also, one of the other comments that I want to bring up from Justin, ESPN subscribers plus subscribers are up because there's a lot of people who bundle it now with Disney Plus and Hulu.
Yep.
All right. 254